and welcome to 9 to 42, the podcast from the team at the Guitar Show UK. Join us for interviews, updates and chat with artists, influencers and those that manufacture the gear that we love. Welcome to 942. This is episode 3 of 942, the Guitar Show podcast. And I'm looking at my good friend Jason, who's on screen again. Hello, Jace.
Hello, man.
How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. You?
Yeah, I'm not too bad actually. I'm really not too bad. I've just done myself what is a ridiculously strong cup of coffee because I got all my measurements totally wrong. It's about knocking my head off. But that'll keep me going through this recording. Not that I need excessive caffeine to talk to you, obviously.
We should have called this Guitars and Coffee.
Guitars and Coffee. It's a bit late now. I like 9 to 42. I think 9 to 42 is great. So we're back with episode 3 of the new podcast, which I'm really quite excited about. I think it's going really well.
I'm still the reluctant podcaster.
You are still the reluctant podcaster. Yeah, I know. It's for people who can't see this, which is everybody, apart from my son who just wandered in and wandered out again. Jason and I normally natter a bit before we start recording, and we both sort of hit the record button. And at the point when we hit the record button, his back goes straight and he sits really, really uncomfortably in his chair, and yet 10 seconds before he was perfectly normal. But this phobia you've got about when a microphone's live, where did that come from?
I have no idea. I never ever wanted to be the front person for the show. I just wanted the show to stand on its own and be judged as a show, and the guy that runs it is completely irrelevant. But that's not the way the world works anymore.
No. You are brand Jason.
Apparently so, yes.
Yes. We've since we spoke to you last, recording setups have changed slightly in the terms of the fact that now Jason and I have both now got mini vocal screens in front of us, housing our microphones to stop reflections and to hopefully improve, even just slightly the quality of the audio. Have we? Is this for vanity? Is this so we feel like we're real podcasters, or do we think it's going to make a difference? Because you look like a real podcaster this morning.
Well, thank you very much. It's amazing what £26.50 off eBay can do.
Oh, gotta love eBay. So we've both got these little vocal screens. We're now peeping over the top. And what was that cartoon thing with the guy with the head and the two hands that went above a wall?
Chad.
Was that what that was?
Yeah.
Right.
What?
Okay.
No.
What? No. Yeah. You've got to be of a certain age to remember that. We're both a little bit like that this morning. In fact, you're not dissimilar, but you've got a little bit more hair.
Yeah. I'm very fortunate to be 50 and with a full head of hair.
Oh, that's an impressive head of hair. Anyway, we are digressing far too much. So today we have another interview that we recorded back at the Guitar Show back at the beginning of March. And today, drum roll, we have
Mike Exeter.
And you were saying in one of the previous podcasts, you met Mike at the show last year, a year before
2019, yeah, for the first time. And he's a really lovely guy, and we got on really well at the show, and then we ended up working together. He came to work for BIM Birmingham, which is the other company when I'm not running the show I work for. And so I've been working with him for 12, 13 months now.
Right.
And I can't believe that you've got music production students that are getting lessons from a bloke that recorded and mixed the last Black Sabbath show that came out and has worked with Tony on several albums before that. But also, as you'll discover, was it Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera?
Yes. Though he was a little bit coy on that subject.
I don't blame him.
I don't know. We perhaps don't need to push that too much, but it was a little coy. But yes, Britney, Black Sabbath, UB40.
Yeah.
It is the Holy Trinity, isn't it? It really is the Holy Trinity.
He works with Priest as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does work with Priest as well. Yeah.
So it's very Birmingham.
Yes.
Apart from Brittany.
Apart from Brittany. Who's just shaken the accent? I mean, that's all that she's done. She's shaken the accent. I mean, we all know that Brittany actually did hail. She did hail from just outside Tamworth. But she's let the accent go. I went
to see her once in concert. One of the joys of working at the NEC is, I probably shouldn't say this, but I don't work there anymore, so I don't care, is that when gigs haven't sold out,
right,
the NEC staff are offered tickets for anywhere between £1 and £10,
right,
basically to fill the arena.
Yeah.
And my eldest daughter, who's now 17, was, 5 or 6 at the time. And we went to see Brittany, and it was one of the truly most bizarre gigs I've ever been to in my life. It was incredibly quiet. The fact that you could have a conversation with people, other dads that had gone with that were three seats down sort of thing. But also, she was only live for the first song. Yeah. And the rest of it, her mic was only turned on so she could scream "Hello Birmingham."
Yeah.
And then it was back to backing tracks. It was odd gig.
Well, it was an odd period of music because it was all playback at that point, and it was all about the dance routine. And I know it probably still is, but I think it's gone back to being a little bit more live now. The manufactured pop scene is not as bad as it was then, but then it was awful.
Yeah, I mean, in my in that period, I went to see JLS, Girls Aloud.
Yeah.
Which was the funniest thing about Girls Aloud is that if you've ever been to the NEC, if a gig hasn't sold particularly well, they have the famous blue curtain that covers off the back end of the arena.
Yeah.
And
so it still looks full with 500 people in it.
So Girls Aloud had come. They'd been lifted from the stage to a small stage in the centre of the arena, just in front of the mixing desk.
Yeah.
And they were obviously set to do a dance routine for all those people at the back. But nobody thought to turn it through 90 degrees. So they ended up doing a dance routine to a blue curtain. I just can't believe that nobody in Girls Aloud thought about it, let alone any of the crew or management or anything. It was just really bizarre.
It's like that it was their Spinal Tap moment, wasn't it, when they dropped Stonehenge on the stage? It's that moment for Girls Aloud, and it still goes on. So, which reminds me, one week we must talk about Spinal Tap, just because we must.
Because it's the greatest film ever made.
Yes, we must. Right. Note to self: Spinal Tap special 1 week. Right. We've banged on it a bit too much here. So back to Mike. So Mike, this interview was recorded in our now infamous cloakroom sessions. The cloakroom sessions, I like that. And it covers a huge range of stuff. So we hope you enjoy that. Have a listen, and we'll speak to you again after hearing from Mike. Right then, we're day 2 of the guitar show, and I'm backstage recording with Mike Exeter. And I have to say, I knew nothing about Mike before I met him yesterday, and have done nothing but chat incessantly to him since we actually met. So Mike's a producer and mix engineer, and he's worked with the likes of Black Sabbath and Judas Priest and UB40, but also Christina Aguilera and Britney Spears and any number of people. But I'll let Mike give you more of a background on that. And what we're going to talk a little bit about today is the changing way in which bands have interacted from
the history of how bands used to work in recording studios and rehearsal studios to how bands actually, work and interact now, because there's definitely been a change in landscape. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit more about Mike's past. So, Mike, can you give us a potted kind of history of Mike Exeter?
Yeah, let me preface it with Brittany and Christina were 14 and they were part of the Mickey Mouse Club.
I don't think saying they were 14 helps. But
No, it does, because there was a whole bunch of Mouseketeers, as they were called.
They were Mouseketeers.
They resurrected the whole Mouse Club thing back in '91, and I was doing a degree in Florida at a place called Full Sail, and when I graduated, I went on to become an intern at the pro studio part of the college, and we were doing the Mouse Club stuff with a really talented guy called Mike Exeter, who was Richard Marx's keyboard player at the time. So we were sending his stuff down on 24-track tape, a slave reel, down to Disney Studios, where the Mouseketeers would wail over these tracks. It's the first time I ever heard the comment, "I think she just hit a demolished ninth." So we'd do that. So that was the Brittany and Christine thing. So that's kind of how my story started.
No, it's there.
And Justin was there as well.
Yeah.
But
it's on the CV.
Yeah, exactly. But I that was kind of almost the beginning of my pro recording career. I'd done a little bit of stuff in England, but I really wanted to get out and do that horrible thing, networking. I wanted to find a way of immersing myself in the whole idea of becoming an engineer.
Yeah.
And because being a keyboard player in the 70s, there weren't many gigs. No. It was all punk, or you had to own a Rhodes or a Hammond, and they're really horrible to carry upstairs.
So you were playing keyboard late 70s then, if that was the point?
Yeah, I was born in 67, so my teenage years were the 70s and early 80s. And I loved playing keyboards, but there wasn't an outlet for it. Even when the 80s came and it was all synths, I was already tending towards slightly heavier stuff, not metal by any means, but I was into prog. I really loved Pink Floyd were my band, as they evolved through the years, and ELO, even though not proggy, but certainly elements of pompousness, and Queen were the big one.
Yeah, well, that's where prog's such a weird term, isn't it? Because somebody says prog and you have a thought of this thing.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't Yes.
No, and that's the point, isn't it? That everybody suddenly visualises Rick Wakeman in a big ad.
But there, you see, that was the first album I ever got bought. My dad bought me Journey to the Centre of the Earth, and there's Rick in his gold cape. Yeah. On the front cover with all these keyboards around him. So that's like an inspirational thing. I asked for a gold cape. I'm here with Focusrite, and they said, "Do you have any needs?" And I said, "A gold cape and some caviar." Right. Neither have appeared. No, I'm absolutely gutted. No. But so that got me early 20s. I'd done a few years working for my dad's engineering firm, Machine Tools, learning about electronics and computer-based machine tools and robots and stuff like that. But it was time to move into actual engineering in an audio sense. Right. And it was a choice between Sandwell College in the Midlands or Orlando, Florida. Right. And Florida kind of got it. It was a bit of an odd decision.
Unbelievable, that really, yeah.
So I did a degree there. I met some of my best friends who are best friends to this day. And straight out of college went on to do the internship. Then spent the rest of my 2-year visa up in Rochester, New York, at a studio. I initially came in as a MIDI specialist and set up a MIDI room there, but also did the graveyard shifts. Right. Because
that must have been fairly early for MIDI.
It was 92.
It's We're actually almost okay.
Yeah, so it was and it was a really cool thing because there were young bands who couldn't afford the chief engineer or daytime studio rates. Right. So I'd do the midnight shift through to 8 a.m. or 10 till 8, and so I was getting the opportunity to get in and engineer sessions where people who were assistants during the day were assisting. They never got their hands on. I got my first production credit on a country record by a band who they just needed someone who would take them on, and they liked me because I had a British accent, and we had fun. And this is less than a year out of school. Yeah. And I also got to work with some amazing musicians because Rochester New York has the Eastman School of Music.
Yeah.
So Steve Gadd was from there, Tony Levin was from there.
Yeah.
They came in on sessions, and I saw the elevation of our local session musicians in Rochester were fantastic, right up until Steve Gadd came in and Tony Levin came in, and suddenly it was like, oh my God, whatever the kit is unimportant, which is a sort of this instant shift in like, you've got to learn all the gear that you have, but it's all about how you use it, the emotion you put out using it, etc. So that was the start. My visa was due to run out. There was no way, as so early on in my career, that I could get a work visa. Right. So I moved back to England and immediately got into looking at studios. I was already living in the Birmingham area. So before I went down to London and tried my luck there, wrote to a few studios and got offered a gig at UB40's place. Right. And their two engineers were going off to do different things. One had a single, his name's Bitty McLean, and he had a single called If It's Raining. Right. And the other guy was Jerry Parchment, who went out to do their 2-year Promises and Lies tour. So they've got a studio, nobody to run it. Right. So I went in and got initially freelance, then got given the gig and ended up as their head engineer. Right. And that's established really at a very early age, because how old were you at that point? I was 24 when I went to America, so fairly early on. Yeah. And then it sort of just tumbled from there into any opportunity I got given. Right. I went for. But that's then a shift from UB40 to Black Sabbath, isn't it? It is. The funny thing is that the only opportunity, and I'm a real advocate for give it a go. Yeah. I wasn't the most confident person in the world. I would struggle walking into a room full of people. Yeah. I had all sorts of anxiety issues and stuff, and I was always putting on a front. So back in the day, I had an opportunity to do a Cradle of Filth record. Oh, okay. Because I was the head engineer at the studio, and they kind of just wanted someone of capability, and they said, would you produce it? And as I say, I'm a real advocate for just giving it a go. Yeah. At this point, I went, not a chance. Yeah. I listened to this album, and it didn't help the fact that I'd taken a load of cabling back home to do some wiring just on a day off, and I started listening to their album, and I saw black clouds appearing in the. It was literally like I frightened myself into thinking doom. I couldn't work with this band. Yeah. What could I offer them? Yeah. And funnily enough, it was the best thing that ever happened, because the producer that came in to work with them knew Tony. Tony was working on an album in Coventry. He got Tony to come to Depth, the studio, and said producer goes off to do another album. Tony likes me. I meet Tony. Yeah. So if I'd taken the Cradle of Filth album, my life would have been very different. Yeah. But it's the only time I've actually accepted that I may have, I didn't jump in and do the right thing. I should have gone for that, but I'm glad I didn't. But then I suppose from what you've just said, you've not then done that since. No. So every other opportunity that's come up, you've taken. Yeah, and it's caused me strain. I mean, I had a major breakdown 5 years ago. I talk about mental health. I do lots for it because it's something that I recognise as becoming more of a problem. Yeah. I didn't know the term existed until 3 years ago. No. And I've tried to align myself with lots and lots of people about it. I talk to students. I'm doing a couple of talks on Tuesday. It's really important to get people to realise that you don't have to do every opportunity that comes to you. No. But one of the causes of me having the breakdown was thinking I still had to do this project, finish this one, overlap with this one, right in the middle of the overlap do another one and do 22-hour days. But, it's funny, and I'll give a little bit of insight into my background here, but I had a similar experience when I was in my about 29, 30, and I ended up having some counselling, and which I would thoroughly recommend. Absolutely fantastic thing to do, and made a difference to my life. But I'll never forget in the very first session, the guy I was talking to said to me, "Look, think of your mental health like a river, and the water running down the middle, that's the stresses and the things that you're taking on in your life that cause you issues and cause you concerns, and that water level will rise and it will drop. So at certain points in your life you haven't got
as much going on. Other points you're collecting more things that are causing you anxiety and stress. But what happens is invariably that water level just naturally rises and falls, and that's how your life is the vast majority of the time. The problem is if the water level keeps rising, you keep piling things in there. When it bursts the banks, that's when all hell breaks loose. Because in reality, there's no plan for that, because the water just goes everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's how your life is when you have that moment. So it isn't something that's unique to any individual person. It's not a particular personality type that will, you can't spot somebody who potentially is going through or will have or has had mental health issues. But the point is, when that thing happens and when your banks burst, you just don't know how to deal with it. It's like a shutdown.
Yeah.
And I really related to that when he told me. And it's funny because I've had that story with lots of people since, because when you've been through it, you actually see yourself spotting it in other people.
You do, totally. And I think it's very important to give people the information and give them the signs. I did a talk at NAMA beginning of last year, and I think I'm the first person that's brought the subject up in that environment, and it was a really positive talk. And so many people contacted me afterwards and spoke to me after the show saying they just recognised the odd thing in my story, that they were like, oh, that's happening to me. Yeah. I need to take care of that. And mine's not counselling. I'm not qualified to do that. But what I can say is there are certain things you could do. If this is happening to you, just maybe step back, maybe look at it. This happened to me. It nearly killed me. I was hospitalised and 2 days from death. It's a big, major thing, but I got through it, and it's informed me so much more the way I am now. But it's so important to get the youngsters while they're in stressful situations, like doing degrees.
Well, the thing for me is when it stopped me, and it does stop you, there's no doubt, it stops your life for a period of time. When it stopped me, I then realised that actually the journey for me had started in my early teens. And I'd not, until it actually stopped my life, did I then join all of those dots.
Totally.
So if somebody had spoken to me about this when I was 15, 16, 17, there's a very good chance what happened to me might not have happened to the same extent.
Absolutely.
It might not have stopped my life. Because, these things don't go away.
No.
But you learn how to spot them. You learn how to cut them off at the pass a little earlier, and you learn how to cope with what comes out of it. Because often what comes out when your banks do burst is that the behavioural traits at that point in time, those are the bits that you can't do anything about. That's the bit when you shut down and you can't deal with people and you can't deal with situations. And if you can find ways of spotting that and taking yourself out of those situations early, then it is possible to it is possible to cope with it far better. But you need a strategy for it.
Yeah, there's a lot. It was something we were talking about earlier, which it leads nicely into, is that one of the worst things is isolation. We're designed as a race, or we've evolved as a race to communicate. We've developed language. It's massively important in the job I do to establish the language that we need to talk to describe guitar tones or what the singer's written his lyrics about. But our language is communication. We only do that when we're actually face to face with someone. Email is crap. All of the ways that the business has evolved into sending mixed notes by text and not even having phone calls about something is so ridiculous that I hardly work that way anymore. And it's become the way the industry works. Is studios have shut down, multi-room complexes don't exist. So where do we get together anymore? And I'm really pleased. There's a whole bunch of us. It was a couple of guys I know, Emre and Julian, who put together this thing called Audio Rehab. And it was basically, we're all going to get together once a month or once every couple of months at a nominated studio in London and have a moan about the industry. And of course, we don't moan. No. We have a great laugh. We see our mates. And the smiles and goodwill that go around that room on that evening is incredible. I live in Warwick. I drive down to London, I tube it in. It takes me 2 hours. I get home at 2:30 in the morning. But what a great way to spend an evening! And I think this isolation has propagated itself so much into everything. We're talking about how you can sit in your bedroom with a little interface and create music, and that's wonderful, but how about doing it in a rehearsal room with the rest of the guys and actually become part of a community? And I think this is a massive part. Isolation has just it's triggered by technology a lot, because it's an enabler. We're able to see everything through the screen on our phone, but when that becomes involved in a creative process, it's almost like the oxymoron, although that's wrong. You cannot collaborate with someone over the phone.
No, it's funny because I've been working with podcasts for a little while now, and I almost have a rule that if I'm speaking to somebody on a podcast, it has to be face to face. Because you can't make it work really any other way. You can make the quality work, but you can't make the conversation work. And we're sat, either side of a flight case.
Yeah, it's really rock and roll. We've got to get a photo of this.
We have. Well, I'll make sure we do. But and as I mentioned on some of the ones I recorded yesterday, it is a cloakroom. We sat in a cloakroom, and it's not even a very nice cloakroom.
No.
But there's the what really makes a difference to the conversations is the credibility, the fact that we are both sat here, and it almost doesn't matter where we are because it helps the conversation. So flipping back to you then, so because this is going to tie in a little bit. So you're working with. Starting to work with Tony, and therefore by default Black Sabbath.
That's all right.
Carry on. Fine. We've just had gentleman's just popped in to get his bag. We'll see. Give him a bit of a name shout out if he wants.
We're going to see what.
He's okay.
He's just checking to see if we nicked anything.
He nicked anything from his bag. Yeah. We'll hang on a second, and then we'll crack on, and we'll find a way of making this work in the edit. And that's fine. No, you're fine. You're fine. We'll get back on track with your story. So you're back in Birmingham. You've done the US thing, bit of California, bit of New York.
Yeah.
Obviously met one of my heroes in Tony Levin, which is very cool. You've got an introduction to Tony Iommi.
Yeah.
What's the world at that point in time? Because we just had that little conversation about interaction and all those things, but I guess. In the mid-90s, which is when I guess we're talking about, the world is very different because all those hubs, all those places that musicians congregate and bump into each other, that's still very much alive.
Yeah, this is 1996. We're working on analog tape, large consoles. Depth Studios was a 2-room facility. So one was ostensibly a 48-track mix room with an ISO room. It was bigger than a booth. And that's where he initially came in to mix some tracks. When we tracked his demos, which was the next stage for what became an album called the 96 Depth Sessions, that was done in the downstairs basement studio, which was a really nice little room, 24-track, couple of big rooms next to it. And it was very collaborative. It was like a wish list of people. I had Don Airy came in on keyboards. I mean, he was on every album I ever wanted to listen to. I used to sit there with my sequencer trying to do Eyes of the World from the Rainbows Down to Earth album, and suddenly I'm able to chat to him. Glenn Hughes from Trapeze, Deep Purple, he came in to play bass and sing. There was a drummer who unfortunately got he was Judas Priest drummer for a while, a guy called Dave Holland, and there's some pretty nasty, seedy stuff went on with him. So later in the story, we had to replace his drums. But initially, it was this great thing of like, here's just Tony walking into another studio because he's 30 years into his career at this point, and it's natural for him. So it didn't matter that it was Studio B. Just came into work, and in the other room we had. Band called Kalik, local band playing, and they were like, starstruck that Tony's there. But you're in the inner sanctum. The studio's an inner sanctum place. If you get through the front door of a studio, you're going to bump into people, and it's lovely. And there's a real sense of community. And we had great fun. I mean, it was good stuff. That I think we had about probably six or 7 years where the studio was really vibing. It was nice. And we were the go-to place in Birmingham because we kept upgrading, we made it properly commercial. And then it was just time for change, and we had our first kid, and So that's when I went freelance.
Yeah.
Which was it was initially daunting, but
you must have been doing that 15, 20 years then now?
No, I was amazingly that was 6 or 7 years.
Oh right,
after,
okay, right, fine, yeah. Right, fine. So I've got my timeline.
92, I graduated, and I was freelance 98.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Forced on me, but it was fine.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, that's cool. Yeah. So, how do you think? So, obviously, you've got a way of working and got used to a way of working that now really is kind of to a certain extent disappeared.
Yeah. What was interesting was the period I decided to. I was UB40's place became. They took it over again.
Yeah.
And they were. If you've seen the movie Promises and Lies, the documentary, they went through some real horrible times. Yeah. That was the time I was there. It wasn't my fault, but that was the time, and so they were kind of scrambling to get their control back of their careers, and there was all sorts of weird stuff going on behind the scenes. So. Commercial studios out the window.
Yeah.
So I'm let go.
Yeah.
It coincides with us having our first kid. I'd been working on the early versions of Pro Tools back in '93 when it first came out, end of '92. So I had hard drives of stuff. Yeah. I had my own little system at home. When I had a few hours to myself, I would just sit there and start working what is now called in the box.
Yeah.
And I started to realise there was this one session I did in Liverpool freelance where I was able to hire in a much higher powered system, and I realised this is the future. You know, there is a way of making this work. We couldn't wait to do all the edits and then get them back on 2-inch where it was safe, but there was something about this.
Well, and I think if memory serves, that period in the early 2000s where suddenly we got the ability to capture multiple audio. Yeah. Because that's essentially what we waited for. We waited for the processing power to capture 24 track
we had to
recording.
Use the cheaper way of working was always using things like Alesis HD24s or Mackie HDRs.
Yes.
Or ADAT.
Yeah.
And ADAT was really creative, but you had to always keep one eye on the error count on the tapes because it was a consumer format made pro.
Yeah.
But I never worried particularly about the format. It was more about always seeing the positive side of we could do this. The technology is now enabling us to not have any excuse.
But even the consumer formats you talked about there, they still required. It was still a desk-based. It was just an alternative way of capturing capturing the data. As soon as we start to get to the likes of Nuendo coming out and the likes of 24-track audio on, basing it in a computer, what you've just talked about, the in-the-box edit, that then became a it became a thing.
The first Pro Tools was a 4-track recorder. It was actually 2 pieces of software, Pro Deck and Pro Edit. Very quickly evolved, but then it took this paradigm shift into it became part of a studio.
Yeah.
And then Mackie came along and did this thing called a Huey, which enabled you to control the mixer.
Yes.
And I'm totally in the box, but I always have control surfaces.
Yes.
Now I'll be on an SSL console with a Huey layer on it because I still want to move faders around. And so what I bring to it, apart from I'd gone around the Reekin on thinking everything was amazing and look, you can draw automation on screen, but eventually coming back to there is nothing better than faders under your fingers because you can shut your eyes and move stuff instinctively, because to listen you really need to put yourself into between the speakers, not literally, but you've got to listen through the depth and hear what's going on. And oddly, a later part of the story, but one that's very important to me, when I was recovering from my hospitalisation, I started listening to a gift from Brad from Rage Against the Machine, because he played drums on the Sabbath album we finished in 2013. He gave me their 20th anniversary box set of their first album, and I put it on the turntable to listen to it, and it all came flooding back about what it was that had got me involved in working with bands. And I started listening to old DAT tapes of stuff I'd done at UB's place, and it was so simple, and it was getting a band in a room together, getting ready for the studio, going into the studio and playing together, not using clicks if you don't need to, ignoring all of the things that generally become crutches for producers and engineers. They like to work on grids because it makes editing simpler. Yeah. It may not be the right thing for the band.
No.
Consequently, it might not be the right thing for a band to work without a click. Yeah. But bands know that I would rather try it without, but I want them to play together because the whole process changes when a band's together. The bass player may not say boo to a goose, but he might play a little lick that the guitarist hears, and then the drummer goes, I want to follow that. Yeah. And then they go, well, actually, if we did that there, couldn't we try that? That wouldn't happen if the guitarist in his bedroom with the Pro Tools rig and his interface and the drum machine or the drum programming software dictates everything to the band. They're literally session musicians at this point. So I think it's really important to get back what it's about to be a musician in a band and create.
Is that something you find yourself talking to, bands today about? Because actually, if you've not grown up, I mean, I grew up through a period where, that's how bands work. Yes. They would, back in the sort of in the sort of 80s and 90s, bands would just decamp to a studio and they would write an album there.
Absolutely.
And studio time was something that record companies were prepared to pay for, and bands would decamp for weeks and months on end. And of course, you've got plenty of studios with living facilities, and that's what happened. So that's what I've always been used to. I've always been used to that first take of being done live, and then you overdub on the top of that.
Well, this is it. This is where you actually get bands saying to you, really, we can play together, or I don't have to use a click. And I am slightly sarcastic. So my answer is generally, well, do you use a click live? Yeah. And I'm not trying to be sarky, but it comes across like that. And they're like, well, no, but, I might speed up and slow down. I'm like, well, if that becomes a problem, we'll address it in a different way. Yeah. We'll go for different takes. Yeah. My editing's fine. Yeah. It's even better now. I don't have to do it on tape, so I don't cut myself. Yeah. But having had that background of making tape edits work, and tape, we didn't have grids. We did it by, scrubbing reels against the tape head, making marks with Chinograph pencils, chopping bits of tape out and putting them back in different places. So when you've got that mindset, you get away from this whole looking at everything visually thing. Yes. And I think that's critical. My pet, when people say, what's the greatest thing that's happened to the industry and what's the worst thing, it's Pro Tools, it's digital audio workstations.
It's the same thing, isn't it?
It's the great thing, but I wish there were no screens in the room because everybody's intent on looking at a screen. And it's not like I don't look at the screen. Obviously, my editing's done on screen, but my screens are kept to one side so that when I'm listening, engaging with the musicians, I'm not looking at a screen. We're listening. I'm making notes on a piece of paper or an iPad now. But it's always about... You learn the structure of the songs with the band. You're not going, oh yeah, I know where the chorus is. It's like, I know where the chorus is because it comes after this little lick the guitarist play. It's about involving yourself in the process. And I think it's getting lost. It's got lost over the last couple of decades. It's coming back. But you're really having to fight tooth and nail to give the band the ability to just get in there and do it. They worry about shit that they've read on Sound on Sound or seen on internet forums. They're like, but spill's a problem, this is a problem, that's a problem. And it's like, God, you're never going to go anywhere if everything's a problem. No, you're just not. Trust me. No. Let's not worry about all those things.
Well, plus as well, I mean, there's so many. You go back through history, and there's so many cherished moments that are out there that were never meant to be out there. That there was and you listen to the stories of how these things were put together, and you realise that recording should never have made it, and that isn't. I the number of times I've heard of snippets that were captured in a rehearsal studio, and that turns out to be the vocal that made its way to the final edit.
Well, I've got one on that. I'll get to that. The interestingly, Warren Hewitt does a podcast, Produce Like a Pro, and he recently interviewed Graham Coxon, and they were talking about song number 2. Yeah. And Graham's like, nobody wanted to do this. He goes, I didn't want to play it. He goes, the other guys, it was just this idea. You can hear we didn't give him. Yeah. And he's like, the sounds were wrong. Yeah. That became one of their biggest hits, and it was captured, and it's gritty, and it's brilliant. And the same thing happened to me. We were songwriting. with Ronnie James Dio for the album. It became called Heaven and Hell as a band because Black Sabbath couldn't exist in two places. Ozzy is still the singer in Black Sabbath, but when they got back together with Ronnie for a bit, about 12 years ago, we were writing at his place, and he put down a vocal just to try it. He goes, "I've got the idea for this song. It's called Bible Black," and he read me the lyrics, and he says, "Can we just give it a try?" And we were just writing. I had Tony and Geezer in the room, Ronnie be upstairs working on lyrics, and I'd just program some drums, and we'd get the songs into shape. And Ronnie did this vocal, and it made it through to the final part of the record because he never ever sang it as well again. Yeah. Because the first time he sang it, he was like reading his lyrics, and he was really feeling them out. Yeah. And it was incredible. And he just said, "I don't know if I can beat that." No. And he tried, and he said, Can you use
make it
and
work?
I went, yeah, of course we can. Yeah. And that's the point. And that's one thing technology has given us. That would have probably been erased because we needed tracks.
Yeah.
But now we don't.
Now it's not a problem. Now you can do it. No. So, what does the future hold for you then?
I've just finished actually remixing a Sabbath album from '95 with Tony. That it was the final album before. They finally called it a day and then got back together with Ozzy back in '99, and that's led on to now Tony's got that out the way and he's happy, and he's just launched his replica guitar from the 50th anniversary. We're now just starting to explore new stuff with him. Yeah. So there's a little bit of writing going on for a project that doesn't know what it wants to be yet, but he's spoken about it recently. It could be a solo album. It might end up being some instrumental stuff. It may be some film soundtrack stuff. So that's one avenue that I'm going down with him. I'm working with a band from Cornwall who is signed to Marshall Records. The Amplifier people have a label, which is quite funny because the head of label, or the managing director, A&R'd the Black Sabbath album that I've just finished remixing. Right. He was with IRS Records back in the 90s. Right. So that's quite funny. And he got in touch with me and said, "Would you work with this band King Creature?" And they're brilliant. They're from Cornwall. They're like a biker rock band. Verging on heavy metal, but I got on this conversation with the lead singer one night, and we started talking about Transatlantic, who Pete from Marillion is a player, Mike Portnoy, and there's this massive prog element. So we've done 2 singles. I'm actually using one of them for my talk with Focusrite at the moment at the show, and they've gone very well. We've just got to get some more songwriting sessions in, and what's lovely about it, because it kind of feeds into the whole the way the industry's working now, is we're doing it in their lockup. They've got a very nice big, almost like a quadruple garage, which is their HQ. They rehearse there, but we did one track in a studio, and then cost-wise, it's just not sustainable. No. Not if they want to work with me. No. And that's not because I'm really expensive. It's just like the budget for the record is this, make it work. Yes. I'm happy. I go down to Cornwall. Their manager puts me up in a really nice little place in his property. It's where they all live. It's their rehearsal room. We make it work. Yeah. And
you can take the time to make it
work. And I took both songs to mastering, and it's the same sound. It doesn't matter. No. And that's the thing. It's trying to.
Well, I suppose the worst comes to the worst, you could always take the first one and actually redo it again, couldn't you?
Well, exactly. Yeah. But it's wonderful. So that's a focus. I'm doing a lot of mixing, which I do tend to do quite a lot at home. Yeah. But I also do mentoring to university students, which is great because it gives you it just enables you to give back a little bit and listen to other people's work and learn off them, because there's some talented kids out there. And it's just great. So I'm just the industry's changed. It's not possible to go in and just be a record producer stroke engineer from day one. The jobs aren't there, but there's plenty of work in other areas.
Well, I think as well, and just probably it's a nice tie-up. That the word you just used there is a word that, funnily enough, I've used when I've spoken to a few people who are musicians stroke influencers, which is a term I'm not overly keen on, but it's a term that's out there. And that is that when you speak to a lot of people, they do have a definite idea about what they want to do. They don't want to be in a management-based structure. They don't want to be, find themselves being influenced. But what they do really value is mentoring.
Yeah.
They don't want, if they can avoid mistakes, they'd like to avoid mistakes. And whilst we know that's not a bad thing because you learn from everything you do, but at the end of the day, I've been in and around the industry for 25 years, and I've chatted with people who are in that situation and been able to help them with often very practical things.
Yeah.
And I think where you've found yourself now is probably a model for where that role takes you, because actually record producer stroke mentor, there might ultimately end up being a term for that.
Yeah.
But that seems like a natural kind of evolution of where we are.
I don't want the skills that I've picked up over 30 years to be lost.
No.
I learned off some brilliant people.
Yeah.
When I got back into, after my couple of years break, I started engineering for producers again.
Yeah.
Because that's what I hadn't got enough of a track record at that point. And I'm so pleased I did, because I learned some incredible stuff. Yeah. And not everybody's going to work the way I do, but I don't work the way my mentors worked.
Yes.
But what I've done is I've embraced every part of technology and process and made it my own.
Yeah.
And I think it's just making sure that stuff doesn't get forgotten about, because just because the latest and greatest allows you to do this doesn't mean you should use it.
No.
I hate it. I had a band last year, and I'm not going to name them, but they came in and the singer was literally, "You'll be able to fix my tuning, won't you?" And I'm like, No, I'm not going to fix your tuning. You're going to give me the time. I know you can do it. I've seen you do it live. I've heard you in rehearsal. You're not going in with that attitude.
Yeah.
Stop it right now. Because it's rubbish. People are relying on something that they don't need to rely on.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree.
It's hideous. Yeah. And so I don't want that to get lost. I'm not an old fuddy-duddy. I really care about music and the stuff that we listen to. The reason that Animals is my favourite Pink Floyd album is because you can hear the tension. You can hear what they mean. Yeah. The music suits the lyrics, and Gilmour's a little bit out of his comfort zone. Yeah. And it's a Roger album, definitely, although Gilmour would always say, "Oh no, I very much had a lot to do with it." And fair enough, but the point is, you can hear that band in the studio playing. Yes. That's not a Pink Floyd production album at all.
No.
And it's real, so... Yeah.
Well, I think it's a lovely place to leave it. Plus, we're struggling to compete with the noise level as it gets louder and louder.
Well, at least they're blues licks. Nan the other week was just shredding.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No, I take that. Actually, there's been less shredding than I thought there'd be, which is for people like us of a certain age, it's actually quite nice. Yeah. But Mike, thanks for your time.
Pleasure.
It's been great to talk to you.
You too.
And hopefully we'll get a chance to catch up again soon, because I'm sure there's going to be plenty of stuff we can talk about in the future. Thanks,
Brilliant.
Mike.
Thanks a lot.
Welcome back. So, the wonderful and actually inspirational Mike Exeter. What a fantastic interview. Didn't necessarily go the way I kind of expected it to go, but I thought it was a beautifully human and genuine, recording.
Yeah, I think Mike is he's a lovely chap, but he's also incredibly open. Incredibly supportive. He's quite. He doesn't mind talking about mental health, and he does a lot in the industry now for mental health. And I just think it's really important, and it's probably even more important given that we're all currently locked in our houses as well.
Yeah. I mean, this reminds you of the period we're going through now reminds you about how easy it is. I mean that's been one of the coronavirus kind of positives to a certain extent, is that there is more talk about mental health, which can't be a bad thing. But no, Mike incredibly open about his particular experiences and just and I know this is overused, but I mean just a really, really nice guy and an absolute pleasure to be able to do that interview. So where do we go from here? What we've still got a few more interviews in the bag. What do you want to do next?
I think we'll probably do Rabea and Rob Chapman as one interview because they do
a
gangbang
of sorts.
I wouldn't have quite put it like that, but they do blend into each other in the fact that Rob then appears in Rabea's chat after Rob's chat. So we'll put that out as because it's kind of interesting, the rise of the YouTuber. So you've gone through, Phil X and Mike, who've gone through the traditional route. But this is a very new world now, and they've got a very interesting take on it.
Yeah. Well, we'll certainly that'll be the next episode. We'll put that together. Which, as you said, it is a different world. It's Mike, very very traditional route, and talks to a very specific time. And then Rob, which is literally as much of a 180 as it's possible to do, really. So we'll definitely get onto that. As always, please get in touch. Best route is Facebook, Jace.
The Guitar Show UK.
The Guitar Show UK.
Same on Instagram and Twitter.
So any of those profiles. I never actually asked this. Is Twitter open for? Are you open for direct messages on Twitter?
I am.
Right, fine.
I haven't got anything else to do at the moment, so fire away.
No, I meant, is it switched on? You don't have to be following. It's switched on. Yeah. I wasn't suggesting just bombard you to fill your time, but actually not a bad idea. Bombard Jace just to fill his time. Get in touch and let us know what you think of the podcast. If you get a chance to rate us, please rate us, because it really helps other people find the podcast. Absolutely will help us in terms of ratings as well. Or in terms of positioning. So the more ratings, the higher up we feature in the list. So of course, there's we're not asking you out of generally out of the goodness of our heart. We'd like to see that pushes up the ratings and the ranks if possible. And the other thing that we're just in the process of launching now is that we're going to give you the opportunity to support the show. So we're just finalising a Patreon page to allow you to support the show. If you'd care to help us support the show, this is something that both of us do as kind of a bit of a labour of love, but there are costs involved and what have you. So if you want to support the show, that would be absolutely great. And we are going to be putting out bits of extra content for those people that choose to support. And when we get back to normal, probably bits of merch as well. We've got a bit of a Patreon-only merch idea brewing, haven't we?
We have, but we'll say more about that when we're back to normal.
Yes, but in the short term, we'll try and bring you some extra content on Patreon. Also, and finally, with feedback, anybody you'd like us to talk to, if that's possible. UK based, obviously far easier. But if you want to speak to somebody from Orange, or you want to speak to somebody from Fender, or you want to speak to somebody from, whoever, just let us know, and we'll see if we can make that possible. I've about run out of things to say for episode 3.
Yeah, me too.
So we'll call that right. Yeah, a huge thanks to Mike Exeter, and join us next time for Rob and Rabea.
All right, cheers, bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to 9 to 42, the podcast from the team at the Guitar Show UK. If you've enjoyed the show, then please remember to hit the subscribe button and share with other like-minded souls. For more information about 9 to 42, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram at the Guitar Show UK. This has been an A Short Stories production.